Okay, thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you to the organizers and CUGH. And I actually echoing many of the sentiments that have been expressed during the conference. It was about 18 months ago that I was sitting with Judy Wasserheit in Nairobi during one of the initial CUGH meetings, talking about the notion of the field of health diplomacy, and I wouldn't have expected in only 18 months that we would be having a session like this. So it's wonderful to be here and with such luminaries in this field as well. I know that Commissioner Hamburg would have really liked to be here today to share her vision for strengthening regulatory capacity to promote global product safety and advance regulatory science. And this is really one of her main priorities in transforming the U.S. Food and Drug Administration into a leader in a globalized world. This morning I'll attempt to do that on her behalf. Good. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about the FDA. As a science-based regulatory agency with the mission of promoting and protecting the public health, our agency commands a very special role in addressing threats to health, and our responsibility and reach is truly enormous. The FDA oversees the safety of imported foods, drugs, devices, biologics, cosmetics, and radiation-emitting devices that enter the United States. Consider that the FDA regulates products that account for more than 20% of every consumer dollar spent in the United States, and these are products that people rely on every day. The FDA is also responsible for advancing the public health by helping to speed innovations that make medicines and foods more effective, safer, and more affordable, and also by helping to ensure that the public get accurate science-based information they need to make sound decisions on medicines and foods to improve their health. So all of this begs an obvious question, and that is, with a largely domestic mandate, and if you think to Peter Lamptey's graph just now of the FDA residing within the Department of Health and Human Services, what is the role of the FDA in the global sphere and in global health? Does it even have one? In 1997, Congress directed the FDA to participate through appropriate processes with representatives of other countries to reduce the burden of regulation, harmonize regulatory requirements, and achieve appropriate reciprocal relationships. The strengthening of regulatory systems capacity, referring to Kelly's presentation just now, is an important part of global health and development, with the potential for multiple economic, public health, and health delivery impacts. And it is an important tool for health diplomacy and security. The benefits of a new paradigm for global product safety expand well beyond our borders. In fact, we posit that they would go well beyond public health. When governments collaborate and invest in strengthening global capacity to produce food, drugs, and other medical products in accordance with strong, sound regulatory standards and practices, exporting countries receive multiple benefits: a domestic source of safe quality products, and economic development through productive industry and a strong, reliable export market. All countries gain access to safer, higher quality products, a potentially transformative win-win situation for all involved. And we at FDA are exploring approaches to strengthen regulatory capacity and systems in ways that align well with the FDA's mission, while enabling more collaborative partnerships and harmonized efforts, both in the regulatory arena and the broader global health arena. So today I'll answer the question I just posed: what is the role of the FDA in the global sphere? And to do so, I'll describe the current challenges of globalization in strengthening and securing product safety. I'll illustrate areas in which regulatory capacity building is essential to U.S. domestic and global health policy, and I'll suggest how the FDA and university partners are engaging in health diplomacy and can do more collectively to advance this important agenda. During this conference, we have heard frequent references to globalization, global health, and networks, and I'm sure that this definition here put forward by David Singh-Grul will mean something different to each of us. We've heard about building networks to promote and share standards in global health education and research. We've heard about building networks of partnerships to promote the value of health equity. For the FDA, this definition and this image of a very dynamic, networked global world represent some new challenges to assure the safety of food and medical products and the integrity of supply chains. We're dealing with complex and dynamic supply chain networks. We have global reach in an array of countries with which we work. We promote harmonized scientific standards and guidelines to assure product safety. We face accelerating advances in science and technology, and we need to build networks and connections to keep pace with these changes. And there's great complexity and volume of a growing proportion of products that FDA regulates, which in fact are global products. And you'll see in this slide a very exponential increase in imports with resources to inspect remaining relatively flat. About 70% of seafood and 40% of fresh fruit and produce in the US market comes from other countries. And 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients in drugs consumed in the United States come from outside our borders. For years, the FDA has collaborated with other countries in the development of science-based standards for product safety, efficacy, and quality that can be harmonized globally. And since late 2008, the FDA, through its Office of International Programs, has established posts in strategic locations around the world, currently in the Americas, Europe, India, and China. Across these countries, there are very different legal and regulatory frameworks, different institutional administrative structures, different standards and guidelines, and often multiple agencies with regulatory authorities. So regulatory capacity is still at variable stages around the world. This expanded global presence enables us to learn about foreign exporters and their products and helps them to better understand FDA's regulations and processes. But it also allows us to work with counterpart regulatory agencies and other partners to explore new opportunities that support our domestic and global needs. Stronger regulatory systems in other countries can also help to bolster the US government investments being made in public health and development, for example, through the President's Global Health Initiative and other programs that apply the principles of health system strengthening, government ownership, and sustainability. Comprehensive science-based regulation that assures the quality and safety of food and medical products is as fundamental to the success of a health system as is the quality of any other component of that health system. Let's take a few examples of the increasing importance that product regulation along the product life cycle has shown in current U.S. health policy. First of all, the issue of access to safe medicines. We've heard through this conference that under PEPFAR, expedited review and pre-qualification of drugs increased availability of 117 HIV/AIDS drugs therapies and access to medicines by millions of people in the developing world. But this success is now accompanied by the need to ramp up pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance to monitor adverse events and quality of medicines and to protect against falsified, counterfeit, and substandard medicines more generally. Pharmacovigilance is the science and activities related to detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects of other drug-related problems. And it's critical to health systems performance, involving all the organizations, institutions, and resources that contribute to protecting the public from harm related to the use of medicines. And as we see the Global Health Initiative implemented, pharmacovigilance systems need to be incorporated as a core element to that. Falsified, counterfeit, and substandard medicines are also a global concern, growing in complexity, scale, geographic scope, and negative public health impact. And yet there's very limited data around the world to enable public health policymakers to address adequately the issues surrounding falsified medicines. Combating falsified medicines requires collaboration at national, regional, global levels, involving a very diverse range of stakeholders. Second, let's consider global emergency preparedness and response, another priority of the U.S. government. The recent H1N1 pandemic demonstrated unprecedented global collaboration. The United States Department of Health and Human Services Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority is working closely with the World Health Organization and a network of countries around the world to develop sustainable global vaccine manufacturing capacity. But the significant financial and intellectual investments that are going into vaccines development and manufacture cannot be made in a regulatory vacuum. we need to determine the critical functions of regulatory agencies along the full vaccine product life cycle to ensure safety, efficacy, and effectiveness in clinical trials, assure data integrity and ethics in research, enforce good manufacturing and inspection practices. In a global vaccine production enterprise, we're asking what functions need to be taken by national regulatory agencies alone, and what can be done together for greater efficiency and rigor. We also recognize that national regulatory agencies need to build partnerships with other health policy entities in order to maximize investments and generate return on our collective investments. And that would result in a globally distributed supply of effective quality vaccines that can be deployed quickly and equitably in future pandemics. Third, regulatory processes need to be employed from farm to fork in the food safety system. And capacity building in food safety has long had a tradition in trade capacity building as defined under the World Trade Organization sanitary and phytosanitary measures and technical barriers to trade. Such activities are designed to build institutions and regulatory frameworks that facilitate trade and create an environment conducive to market-driven agricultural growth. The Codex Alimentarius Commission is an international standard-setting body which plays a critical role in promoting safe food systems and protect consumer health. Codex provides a basis for standard setting by smaller and less developed countries, thereby helping those countries protect their own citizens and benefit from an increasingly globalized market in food. The FDA contributes its scientific leadership in Codex in setting standards and giving direct technical assistance and training to countries in very specific approaches, as have been listed in the slide. And lastly, the human-animal interface, and we've talked about the One Health paradigm during this conference, is increasingly important to food safety. Global collaboration in food safety also focuses on strengthening and monitoring and surveillance of antimicrobial resistance and drug residues in animals to ensure safer food for humans. Better regulation, monitoring, and surveillance upstream can actually counter costly global threats. So these examples illustrate that to build capacity and cooperation around the world, we must also engage in multiple channels of science, regulation, and diplomacy.